every weekend. I sat quietly at our family's favorite brunch spot, blending into the background while my sister Rachel lit up the room with her stories and sarcasm. That day, she mocked my career again, laughing loudly about how someone in their 30s still doesn't have a real job. No one laughed, just her. And no one defended me, not even our parents. They'd always seen me as the quiet one, the shadow to Rachel's spotlight. What they didn't know was that behind my silence, I had built something extraordinary. Years ago, I co-founded a data analytics company now valued at over $80 million. I never craved attention, so I stayed behind the scenes while my partner took the spotlight. But now, the sister who used to mock me, she's unknowingly applied for a job at the company I built. And I'm the one reviewing her application. It's poetic. Really, the quiet girl with no real job is now her potential boss. Rachel always stood at the center of attention. She was the kind of person who never entered a room. She arrived, usually with dramatic flair and stories that demanded applause. Growing up, the comparison was constant. She was the firework, I was the flashlight. Loud, bright, applauded. I was steady, quiet, ignored. It had always been that way. Our family fed into it, too, especially my parents. Rachel's dance trophies occupied every shelf in our living room, while my report cards gathered dust in a drawer. On my 13th birthday, as I stood before a flickering cake, Rachel burst into the room holding her latest trophy, and suddenly all attention shifted to her. No one even noticed I didn't blow out my candles. But that night, instead of sulking, I went to my room and opened my old laptop. While my family celebrated Rachel's victory, I taught myself how to build a data model. It was in those small, silent moments that my world began to take shape, one line of code at a time. By the time I turned 28, I had co-founded a data analytics company with my best friend Sam. We called it Dataloom. The name was his idea, but the engine behind it, the core system that powered predictions used by banks, hospitals, and federal agencies, that was mine. I never wanted fame, so I stayed behind the scenes. Sam was the face of the company, attending investor meetings, giving interviews, shaking hands. I was the one designing every structure, solving every bug, mapping every breakthrough. Rachel always stood at the center of attention. She was the kind of person who never entered a room. She arrived, usually with dramatic flair and stories that demanded applause. Growing up, the comparison was constant. She was the firework, I was the flashlight. Loud, bright, applauded. I was steady, quiet, ignored. It had always been that way. Our family fed into it, too, especially my parents. Rachel's dance trophies occupied every shelf in our living room, while my report cards gathered dust in a drawer. On my 13th birthday, as I stood before a flickering cake, Rachel burst into the room holding her latest trophy, and suddenly all attention shifted to her. No one even noticed I didn't blow out my candles. But that night, instead of sulking, I went to my room and opened my old laptop. While my family celebrated Rachel's victory, I taught myself how to build a data model. It was in those small, silent moments that my world began to take shape, one line of code at a time. By the time I turned 28, I had co-founded a data analytics company with my best friend Sam. We called it Dataloom. The name was his idea, but the engine behind it, the core system that powered predictions used by banks, hospitals, and federal agencies, that was mine. I never wanted fame, so I stayed behind the scenes. Sam was the face of the company, attending investor meetings, giving interviews, shaking hands. I was the one designing every structure, solving every bug, mapping every breakthrough. No one in my family ever knew. They still thought I was some freelancer working odd hours from home, typing up random code. When I showed up to brunch every Sunday, they'd ask polite, vague questions about my work, but no one cared enough to dig deeper. Rachel especially enjoyed making comments like, "So, you're still doing that techie stuff? Must be nice not having real job pressure." I learned to let the comments roll off. I didn't need validation from people who had never tried to understand me. I had a purpose, and that was enough. But then something unexpected happened. Rachel got laid off from her accounting firm, and, in a twist I couldn't have scripted better, applied for a job at Dataloom. She didn't know I was behind it. Our agreement from the start was to keep my name out of everything public-facing. Internally, though, I had full authority. So when her application landed in my review queue, I stared at it for a long time. Her resume was decent. Her skills adequate. Her attitude, well, that would be tested. But I approved her application without a second thought, not to prove a point, but because I believed people deserved a chance to grow. The first few weeks, I kept my distance. I watched from the internal camera systems I had designed, seeing her settle in, unaware that every file she worked on carried my digital signature. She mentioned me once to a coworker. Some ghost named Monica approves all the big budgets. Probably just a legal name to look legit. I chuckled. She still thought I was irrelevant. But slowly, something started to change. She worked hard, asked questions, delivered results. And then one day, curiosity got the better of her. She traced the budget documents and founding records until she found it, my name. Monica Green, co-founder. Her older sister, the one she thought lived in her shadow. I'll never forget the look in her eyes when we finally crossed paths in the server room. Shock, embarrassment, and something else, recognition. That moment didn't erase the years of being dismissed or diminished, but it changed something. Rachel had always been the center of attention, but now she had to reckon with the quiet truth that the company she walked into every morning was built by the sister she thought would never amount to anything. And that realization, that was enough. I never needed a spotlight to feel accomplished. In fact, I preferred the quiet. While my sister Rachel chased applause, I found comfort in silence, the kind that let me focus, build, and create without interruption. When Sam and I started Dataloom, we didn't have a marketing budget or fancy offices. We had a vision, 2 battered laptops, and more ambition than sleep. Sam was the communicator, the one who dazzled investors and gave interviews. I was the architect, the quiet architect, crafting a system that would eventually become the backbone of predictive data analysis across major industries. By our 3rd year, Dataloom was valued at over $80 million. I held nearly half the company's shares. And yet, nobody in my family knew. They still thought I was doing some tech thing from home. At brunch, Rachel would flash her engagement ring, brag about designer brands, and throw casual jabs about my so-called lack of career. She once joked in front of everyone, "Can you believe Monica's almost 35 and still doesn't have a LinkedIn profile?" I stirred my coffee and smiled. Let her think that. Let her laugh. Because behind the silence, I had already built a data empire. One she was about to walk into without realizing it. When Rachel applied to Dataloom, she had no idea whose hands would be reviewing her resume. I saw her application come through the internal system and paused. Her tone on the cover letter was confident, maybe even a little arrogant, typical Rachel. She listed her experience in accounting, her past leadership roles, and then ended it with a bold statement. "I'm ready to make a real impact at a company that values innovative thinking." I read that line twice, smirking slightly. If she only knew how many times she had dismissed my work as boring back-end stuff. Still, I approved her application. I didn't want to humiliate her. I just wanted to see what she would become when no one was clapping. During her first few weeks, I watched her through the internal camera system I had helped install. In meetings, She smiled, spoke clearly, and quickly gained respect among her team. I monitored her progress silently, never intervening. She didn't recognize my name on budget approvals or internal memos. To her, I was still invisible. Then came the shift. She started noticing my name. Monica Green. It showed up beside every major project she worked on. One day, she walked into accounting and requested access to historical financial files. I knew what she'd find: my name on founding documents, system blueprints, leadership authorizations. Everything she thought she knew about Dataloom was about to shift. The next time we crossed paths, it wasn't planned. I had come into the office early just to observe. She was in the server hallway, staring at a printed report. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. "Monica," she said slowly, "you're the co-founder?" I didn't respond right away. I simply nodded. "Since the beginning," I said. Her face flushed, a mix of disbelief and something deeper, maybe shame. She swallowed hard. "So all this time?" "Yes," I said calmly. "You've been working under me, but not because of revenge or pride, because you're capable. That's what I've always believed." She didn't say much. She just stood there, quiet in a way I hadn't seen before. Later that week, she launched a proposal for a mentorship program. Her name at the top, mine at the bottom in small print. It wasn't loud. It wasn't for show, but it was thoughtful. And for the first time, I realized Rachel was changing. Not because I forced her to, but because she truly saw what had always been there. In silence, I had built something powerful. But in giving her the chance to walk into that silence and recognize it, I had also given her the chance to grow. And maybe for both of us, that was the beginning of something new, not just success, but understanding. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was clarity. That's what I told myself as I placed the navy notebook and ink pen into the walnut box I had kept since college. I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted Rachel to see, to understand that the sister she had always talked over, always overlooked, was the same woman whose signature approved her promotion. The same woman who silently built the platform she now walked on every day at Dataloom. When I handed the box to our internal delivery assistant, I didn't sign the card. No name, just a quiet gesture, an open door. Days passed, and she didn't mention it. No email, no thank you note. But I started to notice the difference in other ways. Rachel no longer slouched at meetings. She took notes, asked questions, listened more. The arrogance was fading, replaced by something more grounded. Humility, maybe. Focus. During one internal meeting about a spiraling AI project, I stood silently outside the room, listening as she presented a revised budget plan. Her voice was calm, deliberate, clear. For the first time, she wasn't trying to impress. She was trying to contribute. And then came the initiative, a sponsorship proposal designed to help junior employees, especially young women in tech. It included a series of free workshops and mentorship programs. When I opened the file, my name was there, softly placed at the bottom. Inspired by the quiet mission of Monica Green, I stared at those words for a long time, not because I needed credit, but because finally she saw me, not the version of me she had built in her head, but the one who had always been quietly working, quietly giving. A few days later, I passed by the break room. She was there, making tea. We made eye contact, brief, unsure. I nodded and kept walking. But then she spoke. "The pen is beautiful," she said, "and the notebook, I've started writing in it." I paused, turning toward her. "I'm glad," I replied. There was silence, then her voice again, softer this time. "I don't think I ever really understood you. Or maybe I never tried." I didn't respond, not with words. I just gave her space to say what she needed. "You didn't have to give me a chance, but you did," she continued. And you never used your position to embarrass me. That says more about you than anything else ever could. That was the moment I knew things had shifted between us. Not in a dramatic, tearful way, but in a quiet, steady way, the same way I built everything else in my life. From there, she changed. Slowly, purposefully. She mentored new hires. She gave credit when it was due. And I changed too. I started attending technical briefings, no longer avoiding the camera. I shared my story at university outreach events, not for applause, but because I wanted young women to know that even the quiet ones have power. One Sunday, at our family brunch, everything came full circle. Rachel showed up late, but not flashy. No sequins, no loud entrance. Just a simple blouse, jeans, hair tied back. She took her seat beside me and nodded. It was enough. Then, during an old uncle's usual jab about typing codes all day, Rachel leaned in. "Uncle," she said clearly, "Monica is the smartest person I know. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today." The table fell silent. Even my mother reached across to squeeze my hand. No spotlight, no fanfare, just truth spoken plainly. As we walked out, Rachel whispered, "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never be the same person again." I smiled. "I know, and I never needed you to apologize." And somehow, that was enough. Forgiveness doesn't always arrive wrapped in grand apologies. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet nod over coffee, a shared silence in a familiar room, or a single name printed on a recognition wall. For the first time in years, I saw Rachel as more than the spotlight-hungry sister I grew up resenting. She was changing, and so was I. She no longer needed the biggest stage to feel seen, and I no longer needed to stay in the shadows to feel safe. We had finally arrived at something neither of us expected, mutual respect. And in its own subtle way, it felt like grace. It began with small things. She stopped interrupting people in meetings. She gave credit to junior team members. She sat with quiet interns during lunch and asked them about their ideas. She even started leaving handwritten notes in the staff suggestion box. Practical, thoughtful notes, not just slogans. I watched from the background, letting her grow without needing to remind her who I was or what I'd done. She was finally becoming the kind of woman who didn't need an audience to feel valuable. And as she changed, so did I. I started speaking up in briefings, presenting data models myself instead of passing them off to Sam. I took calls from university students curious about the tech world, and when asked, I told them the truth, that I spent years hiding behind other people's voices because I didn't think mine mattered. But now, I wasn't afraid of being seen. I wasn't afraid of Rachel either, because the power she used to wield with judgment had dissolved, and what remained between us was something gentler. A month after our last brunch together, I walked into the office late one Friday. I wasn't planning to work that day, but I wanted to see the new recognition wall installed in the 10th floor hallway. It was simple, framed photos of the top contributors each quarter with one name etched above all others, Rachel Green. I stood there for a long moment, watching as she arrived moments later. She didn't notice me at first. She just looked up at the wall, then down at the floor, her lips parting slightly in disbelief. Then her gaze shifted and found mine. "I didn't expect that," she said, almost whispering. "You earned it," I replied. There was no smugness in her tone, no boast in her eyes, only quiet pride. And for the first time, I saw my sister as my peer. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up on me." I smiled. "We're just getting started, Rachel." The next Sunday, we returned to our family's favorite brunch spot. Same corner table, same striped curtains, same scent of waffles wafting through the air. But this time, something felt different. Rachel didn't wear makeup. She didn't show up late. She sat beside me and listened not just politely, but fully. When Uncle Henry made his usual jab about my little freelance thing, I didn't even need to respond. Rachel did. "Uncle," she said, firm and clear, "Monica is the smartest person I know. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today." The table fell silent. Even my mother, for once, didn't rush to fill the space. She just reached over and took my hand. Her eyes said everything. Regret, recognition, respect. Later, as everyone stood to leave, Rachel brushed past me and whispered, "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never be the same person again." I turned to her with a smile. "I know, and I never needed you to apologize." We walked into the soft morning sun together. No tension, no performance. Just two women, no longer rivals, but sisters again. Imperfect, healing, and finally on the same side. There's a moment, quiet and unannounced, when you realize you're no longer waiting to be seen. You simply are. For years, I thought success would come with applause, with someone finally saying, "We were wrong about you." But the truth is, the most satisfying recognition often happens in silence, in small gestures that speak louder than any praise. That's what it felt like the day I saw Rachel's name listed as a lead contributor to our newest internal initiative. It wasn't just about her changing. It was about us building something real, side by side, in a space we both once believed was too far gone to heal. The shift began the moment I handed her that simple gift, a notebook, a pen, and a handwritten message without sender name. I didn't need to sign it because I wasn't offering closure. I was offering a door. Whether she walked through it or not was never my responsibility. But she did. She walked through slowly, cautiously, and not all at once, but with intention. That small moment turned into bigger ones. During team meetings, she no longer tried to dominate the conversation. Instead, she waited, listened, asked questions, and encouraged junior members to speak. When they faltered, she didn't correct them. She supported them. I had never seen her do that before. Then came the sponsorship proposal. She pitched an initiative to fund free tech workshops for underrepresented interns. The name? Touch the Screen. Touch the Future. And below that, a simple line, inspired by the quiet mission of Monica Green. I must have read it 3 times before I could even breathe again. Not because I needed the credit, but because it meant she had truly seen me, not the ghost in the background, not the silent sister she used to ignore, but the woman who built something meaningful without ever needing to steal the spotlight. We didn't talk about it right away. But a few days later, in the shared kitchen on the 9th floor, she spoke first. Her voice was soft, but steady. "The pen is beautiful," she said, "and the notebook. I've already filled a few pages." I smiled and nodded. She looked different, not just in appearance, but in energy. The arrogance was gone. What remained was something more grounded, more aware. "You didn't have to give me a chance," she said, "but you did. And you never rubbed it in my face. You never made me feel small." I didn't reply with anything profound. I simply said, "We start from today." And we did. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a rhythm, not as rivals, not as distant family, but as colleagues who had finally learned to respect each other's space. I saw her taking initiative, offering mentorship, reviewing junior reports not to criticize, but to elevate. And I, in turn, stopped hiding behind conference calls and late-night logins. I stepped into rooms where I used to avoid being seen, shared my journey at team briefings, and started mentoring young women in tech, especially the quiet ones who reminded me of myself. One afternoon, I passed by the glass wall of a meeting room and saw Rachel leading a session with confidence and care. She was explaining a financial model she'd improved. And the team listened, not because she spoke loudly, but because she finally had something worth saying. And she said it well. That night, I received a short email from her. Thank you for believing in me before I believed in myself. I sat with it for a long moment, then replied, I didn't need to believe in you. I just needed to give you the space to believe in yourself. And somehow that was enough. We didn't rewrite the past, but we began shaping a future where we could both exist, not as opposites, but as equals, quietly, authentically, and finally together. Sunday brunch had always been a tradition in our family, a predictable blend of syrupy pancakes, recycled stories, and polite laughter. But this Sunday, something felt different. I arrived early, sitting by the window where I used to feel like a background prop in my own family. For years, I was used to the rhythm. Mom complimenting Rachel's outfits, Uncle Henry cracking the same tired joke, and someone inevitably asking if I was still doing that computer thing. Today, I expected more of the same. And in many ways, it was. Same table, same voices. But something had shifted in the current beneath our words. Rachel walked in 5 minutes late, not in her usual designer heels or brightly patterned dress. Instead, she wore a plain white blouse, her hair tied back, no makeup, no theatrics. She sat beside me and gave a small, almost hesitant nod. I returned the gesture. It was small but enough. It carried an entire conversation we didn't need to speak aloud. As the chatter swirled around us, Uncle Henry turned toward me with a smirk. So, Monica, you still doing that little freelance thing from home or just playing with computer codes? All day, the question wasn't new. His tone hadn't changed. But before I could answer, Rachel set down her coffee and looked him square in the eye. Uncle, she said clearly, Monica is the smartest person I've ever known. And without her, I wouldn't be where I am today. The table went silent. Forks paused in midair. Even my mother blinked, surprised. I turned to Rachel, not sure what I'd see. But her gaze didn't waver. I used to think I knew everything, she continued. But Monica taught me something more important than knowledge, humility. Her quietness doesn't mean she has nothing to say. It means she chooses to act instead of show off. Uncle Henry's face flushed. Aunt Laura gave a slow, approving nod. My mother reached over and gently touched my hand under the table. No one said a word for a moment, but I felt something loosen in my chest, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. After the meal, as we all stood up to leave, Rachel walked by me, her coat slung over one arm. She didn't make a grand apology. She didn't try to explain away the past. She just leaned in and whispered, "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never be the same person again." I smiled, a quiet one. "I know," I said, "and I never needed you to apologize." We stepped out of the restaurant side by side, not talking much. The breeze off Green Lake was soft, brushing against our cheeks like a sigh. For once, there was no tension. What had happened between us would never be erased, but it didn't need to be. It no longer sat between us like a wall. Instead, it had become a bridge. Later that afternoon, I returned home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window overlooking Lake Union. As the sky shifted into gold, my phone buzzed. A message from Sam. Heard brunch wasn't half bad today. I typed back, not bad. Let's call it a new beginning. Maybe that's how healing works. Not through grand declarations or perfectly timed forgiveness, but in quiet shifts, in someone standing up when you least expect it, in the way two people learn to see each other, not as rivals or reminders of old pain, but as full human beings, messy and changing. Rachel and I may never be picture-perfect sisters. We might never be best friends, but we're no longer on opposite sides of the table. And that, in its own quiet way, is enough. As the months passed, the atmosphere inside Dataloom quietly transformed. It wasn't dramatic. No bold announcements. No sweeping declarations. Just subtle shifts, like the way people paused a moment longer to listen the way team members began to speak more thoughtfully, or how mentorship circles started popping up without any top-down directive. It began with a simple idea, a proposal that landed on my desk one chilly Monday morning. Rachel's name was at the top. The initiative was called Touch the Screen, Touch the Future. It proposed using a portion of our CSR budget to host a series of free workshops for young women in tech, especially those from underserved communities. It wasn't just well written. It was heartfelt. She had researched local schools, connected with career counselors, and outlined a detailed plan for pairing interns with internal mentors. Right there in italics beneath the title, she had written, "Inspired by the quiet mission of Monica Green." I sat back in my chair for a long time after reading it. The same woman who once dismissed my work as not a real job was now honoring it, not for credit, not for show, but because she finally understood it. And more than that, she was building something new from it. I approved the initiative without edits. And when it launched, it wasn't just a success. It became the blueprint for how Dataloom would shape its internal culture for years to come. Every Friday afternoon, the 12th floor conference room filled with students, notebooks, nervous laughter, and wide-eyed ambition. Rachel was there every week, greeting guests, handing out snacks, sharing stories. She never mentioned our connection. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder. During one session, I stood in the back unnoticed as she talked about financial literacy in startups. She wasn't performing. She was present. She had found a rhythm that wasn't about attention. It was about contribution. It was around this time that I noticed a shift in myself, too. I started accepting invitations to speak, not as NS, the silent architect behind the system, but as Monica Green, co-founder, mentor, and builder. I wasn't seeking applause. I was just ready to stand beside the very people I once quietly guided from the shadows. Our Friday sessions started drawing attention from outside. Local news picked up the story. A few tech bloggers praised Dataloom for its approach to ethical reform. Someone even floated the idea of creating a foundation in my name. I declined. That wasn't the goal. If anything, what made it beautiful was how quietly it had started. Just a few handwritten notes. One initiative. A shift in the way people saw each other. Sometimes during the last few minutes of those sessions, I'd catch Rachel watching me from across the room. Not out of envy, not with competition in her eyes, just a quiet understanding. I never brought up the past. Neither did she. But one evening, after everyone had left, she walked over, holding a folder in her arms. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think you were hiding, like you didn't want to be seen. But now I get it. You were making space for others and for yourself." I didn't respond with words. I just nodded. She stayed for another moment, then said, "Thanks for letting me be part of it." And that's the truth. The greatest power in silence is that it creates room for others to rise, for new voices to grow, for old narratives to fall away without blame. Rachel wasn't just my sister anymore. She had become a colleague, a leader, a person rewriting her own chapter without asking anyone's permission. And me, I finally understood that legacy isn't about being known. It's about what you build quietly, honestly, and for others to stand on when you're no longer in the room. When the 5th anniversary of Dataloom finally arrived, the team decided to host a gala. It wasn't my idea. I would have been content celebrating with takeout and a good book, but Sam insisted. He said it was time, not just for the company, but for me. The event was held in a glass building by Lake Union, where the light from chandeliers danced on the polished floors like ripples on water. I stood alone in the dressing room, smoothing down the fabric of my black dress. It was simple, elegant, not made to attract attention, but also not meant to disappear. It fit who I was becoming. As I stared at my reflection, I hardly recognized the woman looking back. Monica Green, co-founder, leader, and now finally seen. Sam knocked lightly, then peeked in. "You ready?" I swallowed hard and smiled, faintly. "Not really." He laughed. "You don't have to be. Just step forward." As we walked onto the stage, I kept my eyes low at first. The MC introduced us, and applause rose like a wave, loud, warm, and electric. When I finally looked up, I saw her, Rachel, standing in the back of the room, champagne flute in hand, frozen. Our eyes locked for only a second, but in that second, a lifetime of misunderstanding passed between us. Sam spoke first, sharing our story, how we started in his mother's garage with 2 laptops, how we crashed servers, missed deadlines, and worked through exhaustion. When he handed me the microphone, the room fell silent. I took a breath. "Hi, everyone," I began, my voice steady but quiet. "I'm Monica Green. For most of you, this is the first time you've seen me. That was by choice. I've never been good at public speaking, never wanted the spotlight. But tonight, I felt it was time to show up, not for attention, but for gratitude." There was a gentle wave of laughter, then more applause. As I continued, I caught glimpses of faces softening, nodding, but I kept glancing back to Rachel. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. After the speech, I tried to make a quiet exit, but people stopped me, colleagues, investors, interns. "You're a legend." One laughed. "We weren't even sure you were real." I smiled politely, replying when needed, but my mind kept wandering. When I turned to look again, Rachel was gone. That night, as I kicked off my shoes and curled into the sofa, my phone buzzed with messages. From staff, from partners, even from our parents. They were proud. Finally. But not a word from Rachel. I opened the company's live stream and watched my own speech, not to admire it, but to see that moment, her face in the crowd, caught between disbelief and realization. I didn't know what she felt. I wasn't sure I ever would. 2 days later, I arrived at the office early. Not for work, just to finish something that felt personal. I opened a small wooden box and placed inside a navy notebook, a black pen, and a handwritten note. "Rachel, thank you for your efforts at Dataloom. You're capable, and I believe you'll go far. I'm proud to work with you, even if we began in silence. Monica." I handed it to the assistant. No sender name. No expectation. The week passed. No reply. But something changed. Rachel showed up to meetings early. She listened more than she spoke. Her proposals became thoughtful, collaborative. Then one day, I read a new initiative in the CSR folder, an internal mentorship program for female interns. The name? Touch the Screen, Touch the Future. And at the bottom, in italics, inspired by the quiet mission of Monica Green. That afternoon, I passed her in the kitchen. We nodded at each other. No words. But when she whispered, "I don't think I ever really saw you," I smiled. "You see me now," I said quietly, and sometimes that's all that matters. At its core, Monica and Rachel's story teaches us that success doesn't always need to be loud, and recognition doesn't always come when we expect it, but it can arrive when it matters most. Monica's quiet strength and integrity showed that building something meaningful doesn't require validation from those who never looked closely. Meanwhile, Rachel's journey reminds us that real growth begins when pride is set aside and understanding takes its place. This story is about respect, humility, and the quiet power of perseverance. It's about how true connection often begins when someone finally sees you, not through assumptions, but through truth. And sometimes the most profound forgiveness doesn't come with grand words, but through consistent change and quiet acknowledgement. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey, we'd love to hear from you. Tap that like button, Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this, and leave a comment to share your thoughts or experiences. Your voice matters, and your story might just inspire someone else today.